You're listening to the PJF Podcast, a show dedicated to decoding elite sports performance and fitness. I'm Paul Fabritz, and I'm an MBA strength and conditioning and performance trainer. If you want to become superhuman, take your fitness, and take your sports performance to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's do it. All right, what's up, my man? We got Drew Hanlen in the building, world-renowned skills trainer from Pure Sweat. Thanks for being here, Drew.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm excited to join you.
Yes, sir. So Drew and I met through Adidas. What was that? Probably 5 years ago. So I knew about your stuff forever, and then Adidas brought all the trainers together, and we all finally got to link, pick each other's brain, and then we've been real close since then. Work with a lot of the same players now. So Drew and I are real close, and it's good to have him on the podcast because he's a really good basketball mind. So let's start by, first of all, let's just get a little background on your story, because people see what you're doing on social media and they see what you're doing with these top NBA players, but I don't think that everybody really knows how you got there.
Yeah, so it's crazy. I really started by chance. I wanted to be a referee back in high school because referees made $18 an hour. And so I went up to a facility and I tried to talk to the facility manager. He wouldn't return my emails, wouldn't return my phone. So I went up to the facility. He wasn't there, but his office was unlocked. And so I grabbed a sticky. I walked in his office. I didn't really know business etiquette at the time. And I grabbed a sticky note from his desk and wrote, "Hey, I know you got my messages. Call me back." And so Matt Brobeck was the guy's name. And so Matt finally hits me like, "Man, you're persistent. Why do you want to be a referee so bad?" I said, "Yo, my car doesn't start if it's too cold out, or if it snows or rains the day before, my car won't start," because it was such an old car. It was like a $600 car that I had put like $800 subs into, but it was a $600 car with like 200,000 miles in it. And I said, "I need a new car, man. I can't be driving around town. It doesn't start." And so he said, "Why don't you come in my office and we'll talk about it?" And I said, "Okay, perfect." So I showed up. He said, "What kind of referee credentials do you have?" And I said, "Man, I don't have any referee credentials. What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, you have to go to classes and get approved." I said, "I promise you I can do a better job than some of these refs that blow calls during my games." He said, "It's great that you have that opinion, but that doesn't qualify you to referee games." And so we started talking about it, and he said, "Hey, listen," he's like, "I obviously know you as a player. I was an all-state player at the time." And he said, "My son and his teammates, they don't really enjoy listening to dad and an old man coaching. Why don't you coach my son's team?" And I kind of froze for a second. He's like, "I'll give you the $18 an hour." I was like, "Perfect." So I was done with my refereeing career before it started, and I went into coaching because of the $18 an hour. Now, when I coached, I knew as a player, I didn't want to learn plays. I wanted to learn how to play. And I also knew these were sixth graders. And so the only way to really truly help them was to develop their game so that when they got into high school, hopefully they could have the best high school careers possible. And then hopefully some of them could use their talents to get scholarships to save themselves, the college tuition. And so we started working on skills and drills that translated directly to games. The first practice I remember we were working on just contested finishing, keeping the ball high, working on extension finishes. We went into decision making, just a lot of 2-on-1, 1-on-1 with an advantage kind of drills. And then we finished up with a ton of shooting drills where they had to hold their follow through and land on balance. And I remember, hearing the parents afterwards were like, "Man, we've never seen that level of detail." And I was like, "I'm telling you, I know it's frustrating for the players when they're missing finishes that they're normally used to doing 45-degree layup lines where they just go in, uncontested finishes, maybe wrap the ball around their back, etc." So anyways, I started doing that. I was working out at the facility, and I had a parent approach me. And I was working out by myself. There were 2 games going on the other 2 courts. It was a 3-court facility. One of the parents came over and said, "I've never seen somebody work as hard as I just watched you work." He said, "Is there any way that I could pay you $20 to run my kid through that same workout so that he understands how hard you need to work?" me doing my math, I said, well, $20 is a $2 pay raise. So bam, my coaching career is done. And now I'm a trainer. No, but the truth was I kept coaching those sixth grade guys. I fell in love with it. Started training a lot of players around the St. Louis area. One of them was Brad Beal as a 13-year-old. And Brad went from 8 points a game as a freshman to 24 points a game as a sophomore. I had won a state championship. So I'm 3 years older than Brad. I had won a state championship in 2008. That was my senior year, his freshman year. And then the following year, I had went to Belmont to play basketball in college. And Brad ended up winning that back-to-back state championship. You know, Brad had already been really good. You know, he was on his way. He grew a couple inches. He had been lifting weights with his brothers. But, you know, I helped accelerate his growth. And so a lot of other people, you know, said, hey, Brad, what did you do to make that big jump? He gave me probably more credit than I deserved at the time. And as you know, in this industry, results are the only thing that matter. And so once I was able to prove to him that I could get him better, I had a lot of other top high school players and top college players reach out. Started training David Lee. He was my first ever NBA client. He went to the same high school as Brad. You know, back in the day, played on the same AAU team that I played on. And so I started working out NBA players when I was in college, and, you know, the rest is history.
That's crazy. So, yeah, I think a lot of people don't know that you started in high school, which is really rare to actually start your business in high school and not only get reps as a trainer, get reps as a business person as well, starting to figure out how to run a business. Very similar to my story when I was real young and I'm running a business, and it's like I'm doing half the sessions for free and then I'm doing some sessions for $10 an hour, but you're learning about business. And so
there's two things, and I've listened to your videos and stuff like that, and I love your story because we share so many similarities on the grind coming up. But there were two things that I used to do that people don't really see because, you know, back in the day, it wasn't like we were publicizing what we were doing. We were just hustling, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing was I was driving city to city, running camps and clinics, and I would charge $20 a head. And I wrote a drill book in high school. So I had put together a drill book. I called it Drew Hanlen's Driveway Dedication. Basically, hey, you don't need anything fancy. You just need, you know, a ball, a rim. You could do it in your driveway even, you can get better. And I went city to city all around the Midwest. I'm talking about places where, like, I did one camp in a tornado shelter. There was a tornado shelter like facility, and we rolled in basketball hoops and we did a camp there. And there were some days where I'd make, you know, $200. There were some days where I'd make, you know, $1,000. But I ended up selling 5,000 copies of this book that I had self-published at Kinko's out of my backpack and out of the back of my car when I was in high school.
Wow.
So you think about just like the grind, the hustle. People don't know that there were times where, you know, I tell this story just because I think trainers nowadays want to skip steps.
Yep.
But there was one time where I had done a camp and I had made like $300. And the next camp, I had to drive to South Dakota. And so it was a 13-hour drive from where I was. And I was like, man, I got to get to South Dakota. But I'm not going to get there in one night. It's not safe, you know, all the way through. So I need to stop somewhere, but I'm not going to spend $150 on a hotel. And I'm also not going to stay in one of those sketchy motels. So there was a dilemma. And so I pulled into a hotel parking lot, cracked my window a little bit so I didn't have to run the car and waste gas, you know, so I could get some air in there. And I just slept in the parking lot. And about 5 a.m., I get a knock on my window that scared me. And it was the hotel security. Excuse me, sir, you can't park here. I lied. I said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm checking in tomorrow. You know, they wouldn't let me check in early. And he said, that's great, but you can't be like, you know, sleeping in your car. And so I got in my car. I drove, you know, I ended up driving the rest of the way. But, I mean, that was what it was when it was coming up. It was city to city in a car, you know, sometimes sleeping in the car. Other times, you know, just, you know, selling books to make money. I'd do a free camp, but then sell the books because I knew the kids would like the camp. Other times I'd, you know, charge $20 cash and be happy with whatever I made. But that was the first thing, was the grind. The second thing, which was, again, you don't think about this all the time. So the first thing is the grind of don't worry about money. Just try to be involved in as many basketball opportunities as possible. Mm-hmm. The second thing is I did a lot of free workouts just so that I could try stuff out. Yep. So I would watch film. I would be, you know, one of the things that's one of the most notable things about me was I watched I broke down every single made field goal from 8 NBA seasons. So that's like 1.5 million possessions that I broke down. I organized them into 1,800 categories on my Synergy account. And I went through because as a young basketball trainer, I didn't have the experience or the knowledge that some of these guys that have been in the game a long time. And so the only way to shrink that knowledge gap was to accelerate the learning curve. And so what I did was I went to film first, but then once I saw something, you organize ball screens and you watch a certain angle of attack that really works, you have to try it out. And it's one thing to see it, another thing to learn it and know how to teach it. And then it's another thing to be able to get players to do it. And so, I look at, there's so many players that become trainers because they know how to do things. But as you know, there's a big gap between knowing how to do something and getting somebody else to do those things. Mm-hmm. And so I would do these free workouts all around just so that I could try the new stuff that I was doing. And, Brad Beal has joked around on a bunch of podcasts. He's like, I'm Drew's guinea pig. Anytime Drew sees a new move, he tries it with me, and it takes us a while. We go back and forth until I get it, and then he passes it on to the next client, and the next client gets the polished version of what Drew's teaching.
Well, Brad's averaging like 35 a game right now, so it's working out for sure. So question, your work ethic is crazy. Did you had that same work ethic as a player?
Yeah, I used to. So I woke up at 4:59 a.m. every morning. I shot 1,000 shots before school. If I didn't make 850 out of 1,000 3-pointers, I would redo the workout again after practice at night.
Yeah.
I missed 4 days in 4 years.
Where does that come from? Like, where did you get that work ethic?
I think there's two answers. One of them is being a short white guy that really wanted to make it. That's I think the other answer is, that's how I grew up in a family that basically I was taught, if you want something, you got to work for it. So I was the kid that, I did lemonade stands. I did cutting grass. I did anything just to hustle. And, when I wanted a new car, it wasn't like my family just gave me a new car. We didn't have that kind of, financial capability. So if I wanted a new car, I had to go out and earn it so that I could eventually afford it. And so that was what it was. I loved basketball, but I think the big thing was not enough people, really look at what they want and what they need to do and actually follow through with what they need to do. A lot of people say, I want that, I want this, I want that. But then if you ask them, okay, this is what it's going to take, are they willing to actually do that? That's where the disconnect happens, in my opinion.
100%. And so you're one of the rare cases that you became a hard worker in your sport, and then you transferred 100% of that over into your post, sport career. Most people look at being a trainer as a backup. Oh, I'm a hard worker in basketball, but I didn't make it to the NBA, so I guess I'll just become a trainer. I guess I'll just become a coach. I guess I'll just become a broadcaster. But you took 100% of that passion, energy, and focus and transferred it over. That's what's really rare to see, and I think that's probably one of the things that really separates you.
But as you always say, and this is something that you and I have talked about, the thing that I've respected so much about you and your journey is continuously study stuff. You could easily completely shut off the learning and go in full sales mode, and you could make a ton of money helping people know what you already know today. Yep. But for you continue to better your craft, and that's something for me. I don't want to let my clients down. And it's fun now that my clients are getting to another phase of their career, because it's one thing to teach Joel Embiid a fadeaway. It's another thing to teach Joel Embiid how to manipulate the defense and how to manipulate his teammates so that when he sees different schemes and coverages of double teams in the playoffs, now he has passing options or scoring options that he didn't have before. Right. It's a whole different level of learning. And so the thing that I've always admired about you is you haven't just said, hey, I know a lot and I can get by with what I know, because you definitely could. It's, hey, I know a lot, but there's also a ton out there that I don't know. And I'm going to keep exploring that. And as I learn new things, I want to share it to my community and share it to all the other hungry up-and-coming trainers or players that are like me, that share a love for the game, but they crave knowledge and crave improvement.
Right, 100%. You got to be sort of driven by the passion. You got to stay connected to the reason why you got in it in the first place, and connected to the passion, because if you just have a certain goal of, I want to make X amount of money, once you make that, you're done. Like you said, I'll hold on to the knowledge that I have and I'll just survive off that. But, and same thing with basketball players. If it's like my goal is to make it to the NBA and then you make it, what else do I have to do? I got my contract, and their motivation dies. But if you're actually connected to the passion of basketball and you know your why, then you're always going to keep going. There's always a next step.
For sure. I think that it's something that doesn't happen enough. If you think about, there's a lot, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to preface this. There's a lot of good high school basketball. There's a lot of good college coaches. There's a lot of good AAU coaches, and there are a lot of good trainers. But there are also a good majority of very lazy high school coaches, lazy college coaches, lazy trainers. And it's amazing to me how there's coaches, trainers, and strength coaches, et cetera, that are always harping, players need to work hard every day, players need to crave improvement, but they don't improve themselves. Mm-hmm. Or they're constantly, there's trainers out there right now that to me, I laugh about it. They will DM me and they'll say, hey man, players don't get it. They won't invest in their game. They want free workouts. And then when I come out with a mentorship program, they're like, man, I wish I could join, but it's just too much. And I'm like, you're the same guy that has been complaining all year round that your players aren't serious enough to invest in your game, but then you have a golden opportunity to not only get hands-on mentorship, but also be in the gym with my NBA players where you can learn from them and see that you can save yourself 10 years of time by joining this mentorship program, and you're going to make 10x the investment that you put in the first year. And they don't do it themselves. So I think that there's so many hypocrites in our game that sure. They just don't go all in, and that's why they've hit a plateau, and then they're confused why they're stuck.
Yeah. Rule number one is invest in yourself and invest in your business. You could go, invest in the stock market and make an 8% return, or you could invest in like a mentorship program, or invest in your knowledge, buy books, figure out how to educate yourself, and that's going to be, like you said, 10x, 20x a return on your investments. That's where it starts. Then worry about your other investments later on. So that's something that I'm always preaching to our coaches as well. Any advice for young trainers getting in the game now is very different than when you and I were getting in, because you and I were maybe getting in at the start of Twitter or maybe even a little bit before that time. And it was like, for me, it was walking around ASU campus handing out flyers, just begging people to train. Now, your step number one for most trainers is, how do I build my brand on social media? How do I look really good? What is your advice for these young trainers? What is kind of like the initial steps to get in the right way?
To be honest with you, my best advice, help one player get results, and then help another, and then help another, and watch word of mouth take you to a place that you could never take yourself by just false promoting, gimmicky stuff and gimmicky marketing material. I mean, that's my best advice. As trainers, I think too many people try to improve their brand before they improve players.
Yeah.
You got to improve players first. And if you improve players, your brand will improve with them.
Right.
And, it's crazy. I'll have people hit me up all the time like, well, yeah, man, you get all these NBA guys. And I'm like, just so you know, I started with Jason Tatum when he was 13. I started with Brad Beal when he was 13. The first time I worked out Zach LaVine, he was 14 or 15. RJ Barrett, 14 or 15. Joel Embiid when he was at Kansas. Kelly Oubre when he was at Kansas. I'm like, all these guys, were good. They had talent. They had all this kind of stuff. But I helped them way before they were NBA players. It's not like I inherited, these all-stars. I helped develop with them, And to me, that's what makes this whole game cool. I think that the messed up part about our industry right now is guys will go work out with somebody just because they're randomly in that area. They need a gym. And next thing you know, you have guys taking selfies, posting on the gram, and they act like they were part of the development process. And while that may fool a lot of people on social media, it doesn't last long. It's not lasting.
Yep.
And so if you really want to have kind of a brand, the best way to do it is just get a lot of people to be appreciative of the work that you put in with them and the results that you've helped them get, and you'll have a job forever. And that's 100%. To be honest with you, that's my best advice. Like, help people and document the help that you're doing. You know what I mean? Document what's really going on instead of having these video shoots. There's new trainers that start out and the first thing they want to do is do a video. Like, why don't you go help some kid, have somebody just film it with their phone and watch the kid get better and show the improvement process. That's the best thing you can do, is show that you can help people, get results.
Right. 100%. Kind of off that topic, but I'm just curious, like, do you have a certain standard of what it takes to get posted by Drew Hanlen? Right? If you're a player, is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a year that they need to be in the gym with you to like be considered your client? Because that's something that's, there's no standard. For some people, it's like you saw them in the parking garage and you went over and put your arm around them and now you're on the social media and that's your guy. Other people, it might, people like you, it might take a little bit longer. What is your standard?
A long time, to be honest with you. I don't know. I mean, I've worked out so many NBA All-Stars that I've never posted on my Instagram because I don't feel like I'm a part of it. Like, I might have shown them some good stuff. I might have shown them new tricks to add to their bag, but like, the guys that you see me posting, I call the Pure Sweat fam.
Yeah.
These are the guys that I've since their college days or even before that, and they've been with me 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, Brad Beal, we're going on year 14 now. You know what I mean? Like, that's what a client – I would say a client is somebody that is, one, paying you. They're not paying you. They're not a client. So I know that there's some times where people will say, like, this guy's one of my clients. It's like, well, does he really think that you're his guy?
Yeah.
But I would say that's the true answer for me is, if a random person asked them, do you have a trainer? Would they say yes? And would they say your name? Right. If they consider you their trainer or their skills coach or their strength coach, then I think then it's appropriate to post them. If they just think that, hey, I get workouts here in LA, I get workouts here in New York, I get workouts here, then I don't think you're their client.
Right, right.
I'm also a little bit different though, because as you know, I do video consulting and analytics throughout the year with my guys. So it's not like I'm just their off-season trainer, but I think the golden thing is, if that player got asked in an interview, like, hey, who do you credit for your success? Do they name drop you? If they ask, do you have a trainer? Do they name drop you? If they don't, it's like being in a relationship where you claim that you're dating somebody, but they don't claim that you're dating them back. You know what I mean? That's what it's like.
That's the perfect role.
Yeah, I got a girlfriend, and you ask the girl, and she's like, no, I'm single. That's what a lot of these trainers are like out here posting these fake clients.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, I've seen you. I mean, I've been in the gym with top superstars you're in the gym with, and they've never been posted by you. And so I was always curious, like, what does it take to be Pure Sweat fam? So that's good. I think a lot of trainers need to hear that and digest that. Let's talk about, okay, so you and I work with a lot of the same players. And one of the things that I always appreciated was you're always consistent in what you do in skills training. I know you're going to take care of the game stuff, and I know that you're going to communicate with me, and you're not going to try to go kill a player and run them through agility ladder and then take them to do Vertimax and then run suicides after and then send them to me and say, it's all yours, Paul. Like, you play your role, which allows me to play my role. How important for you is it for everybody to be on the same page? Skills coach, strength coach, head coach.
I think it's one of the most important things for two reasons. The first thing is, I always say rally the troops, meaning, rally the circle that's around that player, because you all want to be pushing the same messages. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that everybody is encouraging the player to, approach, next season, or if it's the off season or the current season, in the same way. So if I'm sitting here and I'm saying, hey, listen, man, you need to do this and that, and this head coach is saying something different, there's going to be a disconnect, and now the player has confusion. There's not as much clarity, and then you can see pulling and tugging, which causes frustration and stress. We don't want that. So that's the first reason, is you want everybody, relaying the same messages and pushing and pulling that direction. The second is load management, which is something I had to learn a lot about, because when I was coming up, like I said, Brad was like my guinea pig. We started working out when he was 13, and I used to work out with Brad. That's something people don't realize. I was player of the year in Missouri when Brad started training me, and I was in basketball when he was coming up in high school. So we would work out together. We were going like 3 hours a day though. And I'm talking about not 3 hours of like spot up shots. I'm talking about cutting, decelerating, accelerating, exploding for finishes. Back then, believe it or not, I was dunking. So we would dunk stuff. Like, this is what we were doing for 3 hours a day. Every day. There was no such thing as an off day. If one of us was considering taking an off day, the other one would hit us, hey, lazy ass, like, meet me at the gym, and we were going. So the problem was, For me, I've had multiple knee surgeries. For Brad, his first 3 years in the NBA, he never played over 50 games. And so what we realized was while that hard work was making him super skilled, and it did help him get to the NBA, we had to start working smarter and more efficiently so that we could get the same results in a shorter period of time. Mm-hmm. At his best, we needed him to be at his best, which is during the season. And so part of load management is understanding that you have a job to do, which is make sure that his body is physically prepared. I have a job making sure his skills, his decision-making, his IQ are there. And then there's also other components, cardio components, maybe there's nagging injury that a therapist has to deal with. And that player only has so much, load that he can handle. And so we have to all work together to make sure that, hey, you know what, this player, needs a little bit more strength because that'll help them. That'll be more beneficial. So Paul, you're going to get a heavy load this week, whereas I'm going to tone down the skill stuff because it's more beneficial that he improves his body than improves his basketball, whatever. Mm-hmm. Then there's other players that maybe, they have a body that's really prepared for the NBA, but, their skills aren't there. Hey, Paul, I need to go heavy load on the court because he's not a good basketball player, but he is a great athlete, and then you tone it down. So Those two reasons, we want everybody pushing the same message, so there's no stress, there's complete clarity on, the development plan, and then number two, managing that load so that players at their best when they need to be at their best, which is during the season.
Right. Yeah, I think with a lot of skills trainers, there's a insecurity thing where if I say, hey, we have to work on his body, can you just do like spot up shots and stationary stuff today? They feel like they got to be the hero trainer every session and show the athlete how hard they can push them. And so they don't have the ability to take the step back and say, okay, I understand in the bigger picture, it makes more sense for you to take on the load and we're going to take the back seat. But with you, it's like you understand the bigger picture and you understand that not every session has to be hard. Not every session has to leave them completely, passed out, which you're going to have your hard sessions and they need that. But you can also take the back seat and understand the bigger picture. And I know that because when your guys, typically our guys work out with you in the morning and then they come to me in the afternoon and they show up and they still have their body intact. They can still go through a hard workout. And then at the end, I go off a RPE scale. I go, how hard did Drew push you on the conditioning side? And they go, 6 out of 10. Well, then I know that I can still push them on the conditioning side a little bit. But if every day they show up and they say, I'm 10 out of 10, I got no knees left, and we did an hour of conditioning, well, my job's eliminated. There's nothing I can do because if I try to push them through my stuff, now they end up injured. So I think for skills coaches and strength coaches, being able to speak the same language and just being able to communicate and not having egos, that's the three big things that you have to successfully run a player through your off-season program.
And let me piggyback off that. So there's two things I would say. The first one is skills coaches, strength coaches, high school coaches, college coaches, in general, if you're somebody that's influencing players, you have to understand that improvement is more important than impressing them.
Yes.
Is the goal to improve them or is the goal to impress them? You see all these clown drills that people use. They're trying to impress the player instead of improve the player. There are times where I've had some Hall of Fame legend type people come in the gym and I'm sitting there thinking like, oh, I remember the first time Eric Spoelstra came in the gym and he came in the gym and he watched Myers Leonard, kind of do a workout. And I said, Myers, today we were only working on balance on your jump shot. He said, come on, man. He said, he's coming to watch me for the first time. I said, yeah, I don't care because that's what you need to work on. I said, I promise you that he would rather you be making shots during the season than a flashy workout right now that makes him think that you're going to be good during the season. He's like, come on, man, let him see something. So I said, all right, I got you. So Eric walks in and he sits down and I go, hey, Eric, just today's workout's going to be boring as shit. You're not going to see anything flashy. All we're doing is working on balance on his jump shot and quicken up his release. He goes, perfect. I love that.
Yeah.
Myers was sitting there working on stationary shooting, landing on his tippy toes, high arc and stuff like that. And boom, the 4 years that I've worked with Myers, he shot over 40% from three every single year. And it's not by accident, So the first thing is, are you trying to improve the player or are you trying to impress him? The second one is something that you touched on. There's different phases in development. In season is more about tweaking, adjusting, making sure that you're in them for the next game or whatever is to come. Then the off season, you have to understand that there's a long period of time for them to get better. And I think too many times people don't look at the whole block of time that you have with that player, and they just look at each workout as an individual unit, which is not the case. Mm-hmm. And so they might load up a player on Monday and then load up a player on Tuesday and say, we're just going to keep going until you can't go anymore. But the problem is now they hit a wall at some point during the off season, then they crash. Mm-hmm. And, one of our things is to ramp up. There's times where I'll tell players going into training camp, 5 pounds overweight because we know you're going to lose a little bit of weight during the training camp, or at 80% cardio, because if you're at 100% cardio game speed, you're going to crash at some point during the season. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't make sense to some people because they think that you need to be at 100% all the time, but you can't peak out all the time. And so you have to make sure that you're managing these players' loads throughout the period or duration you have them, so that, again, they're at their best when they need to be at their best during the season.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think more skills trainers and head coaches need to realize the obligation that they have for keeping the players healthy. Because I think a lot of times, and when I came in the industry, I assumed the strength coach and the physical therapist keep them healthy. And then the skills coach and the head coach, they just do the skills, they do the on-court stuff. No, I mean, it's an equal responsibility with all parties because you guys are the ones managing the load. So, the strength coach could do a great job strengthening their body, but if they're taking on too much load on the court and they're getting ran to death in the off season, like you said, they're in peak shape in May or June. You're going to be able to maintain that the entire year? No, it's not going to happen. So, knowing what phase you're in, I think, is huge.
And to piggyback off that, just to finalize that, one thing that I think too many coaches, trainers, skills coaches, lifting coaches, et cetera, they're so reactive. They're defensive at all times.
Yeah.
So you think about, during the season, a player's out of shape. Now we got to get him in shape. During the season, somebody gets hurt. Now we got to rehab. A trainer is, oh, man, everything's going well. Great. Then there's a shooting slump. Now we got to make tweaks and adjustments. A coach, same thing. The coach is like, man, our team's winning games. And then, boom, a new, 2-3 zone is thrown out at them that they've never seen before. And now we've got to make, adjustments instead of players so that they're prepared for every scenario. So for me, it's kind of the old school saying, the time to fix the roof isn't, after it rains and you see the drops coming through. It's just, let's maintain this. So, players should be strength training throughout the season so that they're just as strong. Now it's a different type. It might not be where they're, wearing their body down, but a different type of strength training. That's why you see LeBron, his durability. It's because, he might go 2 hours before the game and do a bunch of flexibility and, things to tighten his core. Then after the game, he might go through a little prehab so that he doesn't get those injuries. Mm-hmm. Good players are going through little, kind of vitamin workouts where 20 minutes a day they're working on their touch finishes or they're working on their balance on their shot so that there is no errors that happen. There is no slump that happens, et cetera. And coaches are preparing for those things that they might not see. Right. My high school team, we won a state championship my senior year. And my high school coach, who had never played 1 minute of zone in his life, every day at practice, we spent the last 10 minutes of practice, the entire season, working on this matchup zone. And he said, hey, we know we're probably going to have a rematch with the team that we lost in overtime last year too. They're not going to be ready for the zone because we've never done it. And every single day at practice, we spent 10 minutes. And sure enough, senior year, state championship comes, never played 1 minute of zone in my entire career. We play exclusively a matchup zone and win a state championship against a team that had 3 Division I players and an NFL player. And everyone was like, why did you guys play zone? Well, we prepared for it because we knew they weren't going to be ready and we were going to be ready because we had done the work beforehand.
Right. That's huge. Looking at your guys, right, we talk about 4 of your guys right now are in the top 10 in the NBA in scoring, which that might be a record. I don't know if there's a trainer who has 4 guys in the top 10. Might have to look that stat up. One thing that stands out about the improvement of your players is it's consistent over time. It's every year they add a layer to their game. There's a lot of really good players who are who they are, and they just ride off that, and maybe they get a little bit better each year. But you look at somebody like Brad, every single year he gets better. It's like, 5 years ago, hey, he's, a top player in the NBA. He's really good. Now is he leading the league in scoring? I mean,
Yeah,
last
he's
year,
leading the league in
it,
4 points a game.
yeah, and last year he averages 30 points. It's like he keeps getting better. Same thing with Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine's like, borderline star. He's like really good, but he didn't, he's not over the hump yet. And now he's a superstar. So the consistency of the growth, where does that come from? Is that just strictly their mentality? Is it you constantly pushing them? Is it you reminding them that there's another level? I'm just curious, how do your guys consistently improve over time like that?
I would say a couple of things. I would say one, I'm very selective with who I work with in the aspect of I only take players that love the game, that crave improvement, and that are coachable. If those three things aren't there, I'm just not going to work with them. I mean, you've seen me. I kick out a lot of NBA players out of the gym after a day, after a week, just because I know that at some point there's going to be conflict. They're going to hit a wall at some point if they don't love the game of basketball, if they don't crave coachable. And so instead of, me investing 3 years into them and then boom, hit that wall and then we go our separate ways, I just choose it, don't have any issues in those three categories so that we can, lock in and rock out for the rest of our career. Mm-hmm. Another thing is once those three things happen, I make sure that I'm on the same guys as far as the long-term development process, and so if you look at like a guy like Brad Beal, a couple years back, it wasn't really an all-star snub, but Joe Johnson got over him as a replacement, and Brad averaged more points, rebounds, assists. I think the only thing Joe Johnson did better was he averaged maybe 0.1 more blocks. But Brad had beat him in every category, and the Wizards had a better record at the time. Now, Joe Johnson had been an all-star over and over again. It's hard to get that first all-star nod. But Brad was frustrated. And I said, hey, listen, we got to take your game to the next level. And so what we did was we laid out a plan where we said, this year, we're just going to work on your hesitation. We think that you adding a little fast twitch hezi is going to really take your game to the next level because you're already such a good shooter. It'll open up driving opportunities. Mm-hmm. So that entire summer, that's all we worked on. Boom, he sees his points per game jump up. Next year, hey, now we're getting downhill more, but now we've got to be able to finish better because the finishing rate wasn't there. Boom, that's all we work on the next summer. Then that next summer was, hey, now let's work on, we got to get to the free throw line more because all the best scorers in the league are getting to the line 7-8 times a game. So then we worked on drawing contact, veering on driving angle, creative ways to pick up more fouls. And then we, added range. We said, all right, now more threes because, if we shoot more threes, not only is it going to make the defense extend out, but then and play you a different way, which is easier to split ball screens to get downhill, et cetera, but also analytically, it's a lot better to shoot a three than a mid-range shot. And so we just literally every year we add one thing to maximum three game. And so, this year, the only thing we worked on with Zach was his pace. Jason Tatum 2 years ago, all we worked on was his sidestep. Last year, he shoots 43% sidestep threes, which is actually better than his catch and shoot threes. I don't know if it's because that's all we worked on all summer, or if he just, felt really comfortable. But that's the approach we take. And I think it's also important. I'm going to bring up a guy that we both work with, Shimi Olajay, who's a guy that when he came in the NBA, he was a guy that we knew was going to be a 3-and-D player. And he was a guy that, we said, hey, listen, mechanically on your jump shot, he really held the ball on his side. He had the ball, his hand on the side of the ball, and because he had no wrist flexibility. And I know that's something you guys have worked on, and also he's worked on with Jason as far as therapy goes. And we said, hey, year one, we're just going to try to get really good at, basically wide open catch and shoot jump shots. Year two, we're going to work on wide open catch and shoot jump shots or attacking wide closeouts. So if they run you off the line, attack closeouts. Year three was now let's work on moving shots. Year four was now let's work on actually being a player. And so some people might say, that's crazy. You're holding them back. But the truth is now he's developed into a really good 3-and-D player because he's learned how to specialize in that role. He's shooting it at his career high numbers, et cetera, just because he took it one phase at a time instead of him working on every aspect of his game, finishing, ball handling, shooting, this and that, where he would have never been a good enough shooter, a good enough finisher, or a good enough defender to ever earn the time and the role that he has now.
Right. So it's kind of develop a skill that's going to get you on the court, be able to really back that skill. And then from there, we can work on other things. But everybody takes the opposite approach. Everybody, you got an hour on the court and you want to split it, 15 minutes ball handling, 15 minutes open shooting, 15 minutes contested. It's like people don't get enough reps at any one skill to get good at it. That happens in strength and conditioning too. It's like you focus on so many things that you never actually master anything. And do you see that with young players right now? I feel like young players don't have the patience to master a skill. And maybe it's where we're at in social media, where everything is instant, and it's like, learn something and then scroll, and then learn something and scroll. I haven't seen many players that have the patience to lock in on a skill. They want to develop everything and they want it now.
So cool story. I'm going to take you back to when Jason was 13 years old. And so, when Brad was 13, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew hard work was going to pay off. I was watching Allen Iverson, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, and just whatever they did, that's what we were working on. Mm-hmm. Now, fast forward to when Jason was 13, I actually had a good, knowledge base on how to develop a player. And so Jason comes to me, and the first workout, I just killed him. I wanted to see if he had what it took mentally, almost passed out like 30 minutes into the workout. And I remember his mom called me after the workout and said, yo, Jason said something really cool in the car. He said, Mama, you guys are going to have to carry me off the court before I gave up. So there I was like, all right, he's got something in him. He's got an it factor. Now I know that I can rock and roll with this guy. And then the second workout, I had him play against a college player and a G League player, and he just got his butt whooped. And he lost 7 spots to none in one-on-one. And the reason was I wanted him to realize he had a long way to go if he ever wanted to be an NBA player. Now, listen, we can make you there. We can help you get there. You can get there on your own. But there's a long gap between where you are now and where you want to get to. Once those two things happened, day 3, I said, now we start your workout program. He was like, thank God. And Brad was like his big brother. He had looked up to Brad. They went to the same high school. And Jason Tatum's mom actually played volleyball for Brad Beal's mom. So there was a big time, kind of understanding to those two. He thought I was going to show him all Brad's go-to moves. And I said, we're going to get you really good at the jab step. He's like, all right, cool. So we watched film of Kobe. We watched film of Mike. We watched film of Tracy McGrady. We watched film of all these guys. And we break down the jab step. And we're going over the ball movement. And we're going over like 4 variations of the jab that week. He didn't shoot 1 jump shot that entire week. All we did was work on the pace. I was like, not good enough. He's like, come on, bro. He's like, that's good enough. I'm like, no, it's not. So sure enough, after week 1, it was like 4 days for the rest of that week. We took off that Sunday. And Monday comes around. I said, all right, now you're ready to move on. He was like, thank God. I go, now we got the jab, 1 dribble pull. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, we are going to build this thing up because we have time. You want to be you want to be the number 1 pick in the draft. I said, in this year. So here's what we got. I said, we have this many years to get you really good. We got 6 years. And he bought into the process. So funny story was Braxton Key, who was a guy that I had helped out and worked with when he was in like 7th and 8th grade. And when I was at Belmont in Nashville, he lived in Nashville as well. So Braxton Key, who went on to win a national championship at Virginia, for those of you guys who don't know, he's guarding Jason in the EYBL that next week. And Jason, 2 times in a row, hits him with a jab that sends him flying. 1 time jab jumper, 1 time jab, 1 dribble pull. So Jason puts up like 22 or 24 points on him. And afterwards, I get a text from Braxton, goes, bro, you got to show me the jab. He goes, every time it looked like he was going to rip through, and I fell for it. And then the times that he swept through, I thought he was going to jab. And so that was the first time where Jason really trusted me was, that 2 weeks later after he had, spent those first 2 weeks, he was like, hey, man, let's just build this thing at 1 at a time. And, I didn't even work on Jason's shot until he was entering Duke. And people thought I was crazy. Like, what are you doing? He shot 7 3-pointers in the UIBL 1 whole summer. The entire summer, he was 1 for 7 from 3. People were like, Drew, what are you doing? And I was like, trust me, because if he can score without the jump shot, imagine when I give him the jump shot. And then obviously he adds a jump shot to his game. He's over 40% from 3 in his, in the NBA. And now he's the 27-point-a-game scorer that everyone loves. But that should show you what I would do with a young player. Now, I will tell you this. I'm not for every player, because if I take a kid that doesn't love basketball and they don't see that long-term process paying off for them, they're going to get so bored with my workouts that they might end up hating basketball. But for the serious player that actually wants to get better, the best way to go about it, get really good at one thing you can hang your hat on and then build from there. And if you build that foundation, then you're going to have the ability to have all the bags in your trick that you want at a later age.
Right. 100%. Okay. So Drew Hanlen has all the knowledge now. What would you go back and tell the 16-year-old Drew Hanlen if you said, I have to make it to the NBA? You got the same body, same genetics, everything. What do you tell yourself at age 16?
I would say the biggest thing that I would tell myself has nothing to do with skill wise, because I did work my butt off. And I shot 49% from three my senior year at college. I shot over 40% for my career. So I was a skilled player. I would tell myself, don't give up on your dream just because you don't think it's going to happen. And what I mean by that is when I got to high school, I started being too realistic.
Yeah.
Meaning like, I was like, there are no sub 6 foot white Americans in the NBA. So I'm not making it.
Right.
Then I look, and it's funny because, I trained Joel Embiid and TJ McConnell teammates for multiple years with the 76ers. And I used to joke around with TJ, and I was like, bro, I'm better than you right now. I just gave up. You believed that you could make the NBA where I didn't believe I could make the NBA. So right. I think that was the first thing was, I just had too much of a realistic – I tempered my expectations based on what was out there instead of what could have actually happened. And you look at Peyton Pritchard, now, and you look at TJ McConnell, you look at some of the other guys, and I'm like, I could have done that if I had more belief in myself. And I think that's something that a lot of players struggle with is confidence. It's amazing. Even these NBA players, Brad Beal, I remember a couple years ago, he said it on the JJ Redick podcast the other day. JJ was like, did you ever think you'd average 30 points a game in the league? And he's like, there's only 11 players that have done that in the modern day era, blah, blah, blah. Brad goes, I'm going to tell you a funny story. He goes, there was one time where, I walked in the gym, and this was 2 years ago, and we knew the Wizards weren't a contender. John Wall wasn't healthy. We knew they weren't going to be a contender. And so Brad said, so what are we adding this year, bro? He had already been an all-star. Then I said, do you think you could average 30 points a game? And he goes, yeah. And I go, would you bet me $100,000 that you'd score 30 points a game next year? He's like, probably not. And he's like, so I was like, so you don't really think you can do it? And he sat there and he was like, you know what? I could do it. We started breaking it down. Like if I shoot 8 threes a game, I'm probably going to make 3 of them. So there's 9 points. If I shoot 8 free throws, I'm going to make 7 of them. There's 16 points. And now I need 14 points. So if I get 7 points each half, I can do that. Like that are just mid-range and layups and stuff like that. So he's like, yeah, I can do that. And then he went out and averaged 30, and it all had to do with mentality. I think so many times players hold themselves back because they have a quote-unquote realistic approach. They think everybody else is putting them in a box, but when reality is their confidence is putting them in a box.
Right.
And I tell players this all the time, especially role players. Role players will be like, my coach only wants me to do this. And I said, you're telling me that your coach doesn't want you to make 3. And they're like, no. My coach doesn't want me to just shoot 3-pointers at all. And I'm like, he doesn't want you to shoot them because he doesn't trust you making them. Mm-hmm. There's never been a coach in the history of the world that doesn't want you to do something that's good for the team.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the problem is a lot of players, they don't have the confidence to trust themselves to make the shot. And I put it back on I have a player that says, I say, why didn't you shoot that shot? Man, because if I missed, coach was going to take me out. That was the problem. It wasn't that coach was going to take you out. It was that you didn't believe you were going to make it. So you thought if I miss this shot, which I probably am going to do, then I'll take you out. Say, hey, put yourself in the coach's shoes. If you didn't trust yourself, if you weren't willing to gamble that shot, if I make it, I stay in. If I miss it, I come out. Then why would your coach want you to shoot it? If you don't even believe in yourself, why would your coach believe in you?
Right.
And so that's the mentality. I spend just as much time on the mental and emotional aspect of the game with my players as I do the IQ and skill aspect of the game.
Mm-hmm. That's huge. I think our advice for our 16-year-old self is exactly the same. I think as soon as I started, so I'm from a small town, and obviously, top in northern Arizona, but I didn't really see outside of that. And then I started going to AAU tournaments and seeing these kids from Phoenix and from LA, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what good basketball players look like. They're 6'6" and athletic. And then I started, comparing myself, and it's like, can I really make the NBA? I don't know. I kind of started giving up on myself, in high school. But going back, looking back, it's like I should have just believed it, because it's okay to set a crazy goal, even if it is somewhat unrealistic, you're going to end up a lot better than if you just gave up on your dreams, right? And it's also going to teach you a lot in that journey, right? If you try to make it to the NBA, you're going to learn so much about dedication. You're going to learn so much about yourself. That's going to be transferred into your life after basketball. So when people come to me and they're like, I don't think I could make it, I'm thinking about giving up, it's like, why? You're only young once. Like, go all in, see what you can get, learn along the way, and then take all of that energy, all of that passion that you gain from that, transfer it over to your post-playing career. So yeah, I think that's huge. Anything like physically, as far as like your game that you would go back and tell yourself, or you had it figured out as far as like exactly how you were training?
I would say I had it figured out. I would say that looking back, I was doing a lot of things that I think are really good even to this day. Meaning, I was working on game skills. I was working on bounce. I was working on finishes. There's definitely things I would have improved. I would have spent a lot more time on defense because that was an area that I did not at all. And so offensively, I was talented. I got it really, really, really well. Elite shooter. One year, I think I was top 5 in the country in assist turnover ratio. So I could really take care of the ball and make good decisions. But as a defender, I never put the time and effort. And also I didn't have the confidence because I think a lot of defense is just confidence. And so I would spend more time on the defensive side of the ball because I feel like if I had better defense, it would have also given me more confidence because if you can stop somebody, then you're basically playing with house money on the offensive end. Yeah. Whereas if they score on you, now you're a little bit more conservative because you can't make a mistake and give up buckets on the other end. I really do believe that a lot of players, what I call, have justifiable excuses. And I'm writing a book right now called Stop BSing Yourself. So I've spent the last 2 years researching basically the psychology of why people lie to themselves. Think about how many people say, man, I really want to get in the best shape of my life. And then they're like, this one donut's not going to hurt. And it's like, come on, like, what are you doing? Or they say, I really want to be an NBA player. And you're like, okay, here's what you need to do. And it's like, I'm not willing to do all of that stuff. And one of the things that I see a lot of times with players is they don't go all in and do everything they possibly can in any aspect of their game, because then they can convince themselves, well, if I just turned up the notch a little bit, then I could have made it. They don't want to admit that if they go all in and they don't make it, they fail. And people don't want to experience failure. So what they do is they hold themselves back on purpose. So for me, maybe for you, I don't want to speak for you, I basically in high school decided that I didn't think I could make the NBA. So then I said, I don't even want to play in the NBA. That's not something that I really want to do. I just want to play in the NCAA tournament because I knew I could make the NCAA tournament. I knew that I was going to a school that was going to compete for conference championships. I played in 2 NCAA tournaments. I also gave myself an out. And I think that's what a lot of players do is they give themselves these outs where they don't go all in. They don't get in the best shape of their life. They don't give up, junk food, eat all the way. They don't practice the way they should. They don't do all the things that they should because they can justify why they didn't make it.
Right.
Whereas if they go all in and they're still not good enough, that's a hard pill to swallow that you just aren't good enough. You're not talented enough. You just don't have it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to, with some of my guys have chances to be MVPs. Joel's one of the front runners right now. And that's the big thing we've talked about is, are you 10 out of 10 in strength and conditioning? Are you 10 out of 10 in your rest and recovery? Are you 10 out of 10 in your therapy and treatment on a daily basis? Are you 10 out of 10 in getting extra work in? Are you 10 out of 10 on film study? All of that, what is your score out of 50? Mm-hmm. Are you at a 50 out of 50? Because if you are, now we have a chance to compete for titles and MVPs. But if you're not, you're always going to fall a little bit short.
Yep. No, 100%. I love that. Where can the people find you, Drew? You got an app for players. You got a mentorship for coaches, right?
I do. Yeah. So the big things that I have an app for players that allows them to build workouts based on what they need to work on. Mm-hmm. They say how many minutes they want to work out. They say what they want to work out on, and it creates a customized workout based on those parameters. So that's the Pure Sweat Basketball app. I've got a virtual basketball school. I've always been so I don't even know what the right word is, but I've always been so mad that there was never like a school of basketball that I could go to and learn basketball, like you can learn math and science and social studies. So I created an online basketball school where, there's, I think, 16 courses right now. I add a course every month, and it's literally a school for people that want to learn basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing is the mentorship program that you talked about. Each year, I take a limited amount of coaches. I do monthly Zooms with them. They get access to everything that I do. You come in the gym and work out. On the court, they're setting screens, passing, and on the garden, my NBA players, just because I think hands-on experience is so important. So those are the main things that I'm doing. But it's fun. I think you would say this too. It's fun for us to be able to help the people that were in our shoes, whether it's a player that is trying to come up. We were that player that was hungry for knowledge and trying to improve, or whether you're that trainer that is at the start of the journey that is looking at some of these guys that have a ton of followers or a ton of fame or a ton of financial, incentives. And you look at it and that's so reach, but to be able to help those guys get past that plateau and get to the next level, it's something that, I feel super blessed for. I know that you probably feel the exact same way.
For sure. 100%. I mean, we didn't have the resources when we were coming up. I mean, I didn't have a trainer. I remember there was a trainer in my city. It was one trainer, and he charged $20 an hour, which is very affordable. He was actually really good. I did one session, and then after, I'm like, I can't pay $20 an hour. And I always had that in the back of my mind is like, man, I just wish that I could get this training up. And now you can sign up for your program. You can get on my program. You can be on NBA skills trainer and an NBA strength coach's program, and it's actually very affordable. That's what's crazy is these kids have all the resources. It's really just a matter of, are they willing to put in the work? And then same thing for trainers. It's like you and I had to, lose probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in mistakes that, you can make a lot more money if you just go back and you correct those mistakes. And we're giving that out, we're giving this advice. And so you can get yourself 10 years ahead really quick by just taking advice and learning from our mistakes and our successes. So it's one of my favorite things is being able to educate players and especially educate coaches so that I can help them along their journey. And the field is transforming just since we've been in. Like when you and I weren't the first, but I think kind of in that social media era, we're kind of some of the first to get to the top. And now every time I log on, man, I see 1,000 new trainers and there's so many trainers. The field is evolving. And so it's good for us to be able to give back.
Here's the other thing too. I was actually talking to a couple guys that had interned for me 2 years ago last night, and they were like, Drew, we have a question for you. Do you think we need to move areas? And I said, why would you move areas? And they're in a big city. I don't want to say the city because I don't want to, identify the guys. And they said, well, there's so many trainers around here. And I said, you know what you're doing? You don't think you're the best trainer in that area. Because guess what? If I came city with all those other trainers, I promise you, I would show up at that trainer's gym, work out on the other end, that everybody that they worked with knew that I was a better trainer in town.
Yeah.
And I said, that's what you need to do. You need to work on your craft. And the problem now, when we were coming up, accessibility to content was so hard. That was the problem. Now the problem is deciding good content and what's bad content. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. I started during this pandemic, I started working on my golf game. And so the first thing I did was I jumped on YouTube. And, I jumped on YouTube. I started looking at videos. And then me, because I'm obsessed with improving, I bought about 20 different programs. So I'm the opposite of the coach that is afraid to invest. I had like $600 of monthly recurring $9 programs that I had racked up. The issue was I go to the swing coach and he says, hey, absolutely do not pull your arms down, use your hips and your swing will connect. I said, all right, perfect. So I out to the driving range, I started doing that. So then I'm watching, Tiger's old swing coach, Butch Harmon, and he says, hey, what you need to do is let your hands drop. And I'm like, wait a second. The other guy just said that was the wrong thing to do. Mm-hmm. So I said, let me ask the third. I'm going to look at the third guy's program because obviously, I'm going to go with the majority. He said something completely different. And so what I realized was not only is finding a mentor important, but you have to find the right mentor that can help accelerate your growth. Yeah, as a player, you have to find the right trainer that can accelerate your growth. And the thing that my ultimate goal in this whole thing is I want to level the playing field, meaning for players, coaches, trainers, whatever, if they're willing to put in the work, I want them to have the resources to be able to get to where they want to get to. Because right now, I think the biggest problem is there are a lot of players that work extremely hard on their game that will never make it because they're working on the wrong skills or they're being trained by the wrong person. There are also a lot of trainers that are going to put in a ton of man hours, but they're not studying the right things. They're not doing the right business practices, and they're not, learning the right strategies to business and improve their clientele. That will never make it over a plateau of maybe a part-time gig or maybe kind of a full-time, and they're struggling because they never get that right mentorship.
Right.
And so that's what I think both of us do is we want to be able to give the best knowledge, the best business advice, the best basketball advice, the best training advice, so that eventually these trainers, players, strength coaches can where they want to get to if they're willing to put in the work.
100%. Couldn't say it any better. Hey, next time you're in LA, you're coming by the house, and I'm challenging you to 9 holes of mini golf. My game is incredible. My mini golf, not my golf game, but my mini golf game.
Yeah, we'll do it. I mean, I know you got the home court advantage, being there every day, knowing kind of the cracks, and you know how mini courses are. They have the little bumps and bruises, but
you got the technique.
We'll definitely do it.
You got all the programs, so you got the putting technique down.
I've got about 20 different grips that I can try to pick one of them to work.
Right. All right, my man. I appreciate you giving us the gems. I hope we can do another podcast someday, and I'll be seeing you soon.
Awesome. Appreciate you, my man.
All right, my guy. Later.